Good day, everyone. For today's video, we are going to discuss a relatively new crime introduced as Article 134-A of the Revised Penal Code. The crime I'm talking about is the crime of coup d'etat. Article 134-A, the crime of coup d'etat. The crime of coup d'etat is a swift attack accompanied by violence, intimidation, threat, strategy, or stealth directed against duly constituted authorities of the Republic of the Philippines or any military camp or installation, communications network, public utilities, or other facilities needed for the exercise and continued possession of power, singly or simultaneously carried out anywhere in the Philippines by any person or persons belonging to the military or police or holding any public office of employment with or without civilian support or participation for the purpose of seizing or diminishing state power, as amended by Republic Act 6968. Universally, a coup d'etat or coup is understood as the removal and seizure of a government and its powers. Typically, it is an illegal, unconstitutional seizure of power either by a political faction or by the military. The term coup d'etat comes from the same French word coup d'etat, which literally means stroke of state or blow of state. Although the concept of a coup d'etat has been a fixture in European politics and history since antiquity, the phrase or the word coup d'etat or coup is of relatively recent coinage. In the Philippines, it was only in 1990 that coup d'etat was punished as a felony in the revised penal code by its insertion as Article 134-A, right after the crime of rebellion, pursuant to Republic Act 6968. Now, let me give you a little bit of history here as to the reason why coup d'etat was inserted as a crime in the year 1990. Several years prior to 1990, particularly during the time of the late President Cory Aquino, there were several coup attempts made by members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines belonging to the Reform the Armed Forces Movement or RAM, led by then Senator Gregorio Honasan or Gringo Honasan. And the most serious attempt to seize power by the RAM or by the Reform the Armed Forces Movement came on December 1, 1989. And it was during this time that Metro Manila was shaken by the Christmas time coup, which almost seized the presidential palace. But it was completely defeated by the Philippine government several days later, particularly on December 9, 1989. So it was because of this series of coup d'etats that Congress at that time saw fit to enact Republic Act 6968, which made coup d'etat as a crime or as a felony in particular, which is now Article 134-A of the Revised Penal Code. Elements. Number one, the offender or offenders must be a person or persons belonging to the military or police or holding any public office or employment. Second element, it is committed by means of a swift attack accompanied by violence, intimidation, threat, strategy, or stealth. Third element, the attack is directed against duly constituted authorities of the government or any military camp or installation, communication networks, public utilities or other facilities needed for the exercise and continued possession of power. And last element, the purpose of the attack is to seize or at the very least diminish state power. How is coup d'etat committed? It is committed by a swift attack, accompanied by violence or intimidation or threat or strategy or stealth. Take note of the particular use of the adjective swift, which comes before the word attack, or which qualifies the word attack, meaning to say, the attack must be immediate and fast, and the attack must be accompanied either by violence or by intimidation or by threat or by strategy or stealth. It need not be accompanied by violence all the time. Against whom it is committed? It is committed against the duly constituted authorities of the government or any military camp or installation, communication networks, public utilities, or other facilities needed for the exercise and continued possession of power. As to the number of offenders, can it be committed by one person? Yes, because if you look again, Article 134-A, the article uses the word committed by any person, meaning singular or persons. So as to the number of offenders, it need not be in multitudes. Okay? And it may be committed singly or it may be committed or simultaneously carried out anywhere in the Philippines as long as it is directed against the duly constituted authorities. And by whom is coup d'etat committed? It is committed by, take note of this, by any person or persons belonging to the military or police or holding any public office or employment with or without civilian support or participation. And last but not the least, the purpose of coup d'etat is to seize or at the very least diminish state power. Distinctions between the crime of rebellion and coup d'etat. The essence of rebellion is rising publicly and taking arms against the government. While in coup d'etat, the essence is a swift attack against the government or its military camps and installations, communication networks, public facilities, and utilities essential to the continued exercise of governmental powers. Again, even with this first distinction, you can readily see the difference. In rebellion, the mere act of rising publicly and taking arms against the government for the purpose of overthrowing the government is enough to constitute a rebellion. Like what I said before in the other video, an actual clash of arms is not necessary. But in coup d'etat, there must be a swift attack against the duly constituted authorities of the government. Second distinction, in rebellion, it involves or it must involve a multitude of people involving crowd action. Whereas in coup d'etat, it may be committed singly by one person or collectively. In rebellion, it does not require that the principal participants be members of the AFP, PNP, or any public officer. Whereas in the crime of coup d'etat, the principal offenders must be members of the AFP or PNP or any public officer with or without civilian support. In rebellion, the purpose is to overthrow the government so that the offenders can establish their own government. In coup d'etat, The purpose is to destabilize, immobilize, or paralyze the existing government by taking over such facilities and utilities. Although we can argue, no, that the purpose, of course, of the military in destabilizing or immobilizing or paralyzing the existing government is to eventually take over that government. And in rebellion, the crime is committed through force or violence. Although, as I said, the mere act of rising publicly and taking arms are enough to constitute a rebellion so long as the purpose of the rebellion is made public. And in coup d'etat, it may be committed not only through force or violence but also by threat, intimidation, strategy, or stealth.